Good morning, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome. I'm Ross, and I'm live from the Athenaeum in Jackson, Louisiana, home of Horeb Institute for the Historical and Objective Research and Exploration of the Bible, and home of United Israel World Union Center South. Thank you very much for joining me today for my class, The Four Stone Tablets. The Four Stone Tablets. By the way, I want you to pray that the weather holds out. We are under severe storm weather tracking, and so should the event happen that's predicted, we may have to come to you later, but just stretch your hands toward the screen, pray that we make it, and it all depends on your faith. Working through the Pentateuch with you, we are currently in an annual cycle of readings. We are in the book of Exodus. We're in a series within a series. Our larger series is Pentateuch in Perspective, and what we're doing is now we're in the book of Exodus in a sort of a sub-series called Leaving Egypt. Today, we're working through material in Torah portion, Ki Tissa, and that's Exodus chapter 30, verse 11 through Exodus 34, verse 35. So we've got a lot of material to cover today. We're doing something a little bit different today. We've done this before in other classes. We're going to be following a worksheet. The worksheet is available all over the place. You'll also have help, thanks to Seth, with some verses on the screen. But I highly encourage you to get the document. The document that is listed in the description. The link is in the description. I also posted it on our Discord and on our Patreon and everywhere I can think to post it. So you'll need that, but you don't need it necessarily right now. I would encourage you to get it if you can. It's on my academia page. The title is Comparing Narrative Sources, a Study of Parsha Ki Tissa. Ki Tissa. It's going to look like this. It's going to be one of our horizontal studies, and you can see that very clearly even on your screen, but I highly recommend that you use it. It's going to be easier to follow. And what we're doing here with this sheet, with this class, is we are comparing, as the title of the paper would indicate, narrative sources from Ki Tissa, which is the Torah portion in Exodus, with the material that's found primarily in Torah portion Ekev, and that is in Deuteronomy chapter 7 through 11. Now, we're going to do this horizontal study. The reason it's important to do this sort of thing, and I don't know of many people who are doing this, maybe you do, outside of what we do week by week, is if you don't pull these narrative sources together and look at them side by side, you're never going to notice the things that we're going to point out. Let me tell you why. If you follow the annual cycle of readings in its normal flow and you don't read ahead in the story, if you're reading Ki Tissa now, it's going to be 22 weeks, some years, 26 weeks, before you get to similar narrative later in the Pentateuch, right? So this is the problem, and it's the reason most people don't notice the problems and the difficulties and the the variations within the text within these narrative sources. So again, we're talking about almost half a year. So let's work through the material in Ki Tissa, and you follow it pretty closely. And you become familiar with the material therein. Again, 6 months later, when you read these stories from another source, and that's what it is, you will have forgotten the differences, and so you're going to miss out on some valuable things. And what I would also add is most people that I know, let me just put it as bluntly as I can. I don't know anybody else who's studying the Torah like this. That's why it's important for us to do it here. We're going to do just that. And when we compare the material in Ki Tissa with the material in the Deuteronomy Torah portion with similar narration, what you're going to see beyond any doubt is that we're dealing with the same stories or the same events are being told, but they're being told by different narrators. They're being told by different sources. This is not, and we'll see this over and over and over in the Pentateuch, this is not a matter of the event happened and it's narrated for the first time in Exodus, and then Deuteronomy is just a retelling, slight difference in some of the memories of some of the details. No, these are different writers, different sources, different times even, and we'll be able to show all of that over the course of our longer study. So, bottom line, what's revealed when we do this sort of comparative study, this horizontal reading, what is revealed is that these are from different hands, different sources. And so what we're going to do again today is we're going to look at Exodus and Deuteronomy, where they both cover the same events. Now, let me tell you what those events are at a very high level. At a very high level, we're dealing with the giving of 4 stone tablets overall. There's a giving of stone tablets. There is the story of a cow and the worship thereof. And then those tablets are broken and another set of tablets are made. So you got tablets, cow, tablets. That's the high level overview. But we're going to dig much, much deeper than that. If I set out to make sort of a general, broad overview of the material we're going to be covering between Exodus and Deuteronomy, here's what it is. Contextually, the material is presented as taking place the day after the day of assembly. Now remember, the day of the assembly is a phrase used 3 times only in Deuteronomy to refer to the day where the Decalogue is given from the mount, spoken from the midst of the fire, and so forth, on the day of the assembly. That's what it's called. Only Deuteronomy knows this. According to the story in Exodus and Deuteronomy, sometime after, we don't get an exact time period looking at either of the sources, Exodus or Deuteronomy, sometime after the words are spoken from the fire on the day of assembly from the mountain, sometime after that, Moses ascends he's called up to ascend the mountain to receive the first set of stone tablets, okay? And then, according to both accounts, he spends 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain. And during that time, towards the end of that time, a corruption happens down at the floor, right? Down at the base of the mountain. He's up on the mountain. I've talked about this. It's almost as if we've got 2 theaters playing. In the top theater, or on one theater screen, you got Moses in the mountain. The other theater screen has the people at the base of the mountain. And while he's away for 40 days, there's a major turning, a corruption that takes place. There's an image that's made. Moses, at the top, is told to go down, and when he saw, now, between the accounts we get some variations here, but when he saw what was taking place below, he throws the tablets and shatters them. Moses is then told to make a new set like the first set. So now we've got a second set because he just shattered the first set. And God says to Moses in both accounts that God, that Elohim, will write on the tablets the same words that were on the first. So according to both narrative accounts, Exodus and Deuteronomy, the language is basically the same in a broad sense. Moses then comes down the mountain with the second set of tablets, and that brings us to a closer look, okay? So that's the story in its broadest sense. Now we're going to look at these 2 narratives, and we're going to be digging into the details. So let me tell you about the sheet first of all, and then we're going to look at the verses specifically. Again, this worksheet is on my academia page, but links to it are in the description of this video. If you look at this chart, column 1 is going to be narrative notes. Column 2 is going to be the Exodus column, which is going to have, as we work through, you'll see it'll have text from Exodus 24, chapter 32, and even chapter 34. All three of those chapters will be in that center column. On the right-hand column, let me get this right in point. Okay, in this column, you're going to see Deuteronomy chapter 9 and 10. Again, all we're doing is matching up, lining up similar narration between these different sources by different writers, and you'll see why as we work through. Bold indicates on the chart where there is an almost, or sometimes, in some cases, an exact phrasing between one source and the next, as if the later scribes are looking at a similar source behind the sources that they are making. Now, one of the things that I wanted to tell you about this sheet, this is part of a larger project that I'm working on. I don't have a proposed end date for it. I'm just working on it in between other projects. And that project is called The Life and Laws of Moses. It's going to begin in the book of Exodus when we meet Moses and go all the way through the end of Deuteronomy. And what the purpose is going to be is the narrative, the text will flow. It's going to be in the ASV, by the way. Text will flow as it always does in any Bible, except where, like today, if I'm working in Exodus 24 and I have readings from Deuteronomy 9 that line up with it, I'll bring that in. So it'll be 2 or 3, sometimes 4 columns, depending on how many narrative sources need to be displayed. Then when it's a singular source, it goes back to 1 column. Now, about this chart, I've been working on this for over a year. Some places in the text, I've got documents that are a couple of years old. So I've used different translations. In the end, before we publish, all of this will be revised and put in the ASV. I like the ASV. It's a time-honored translation. It's more literal than most, and it's in the public domain, so it allows me to use it without getting into all sorts of other difficulties. So the ASV is going to be the end result, but you'll notice that this document is not in the ASV. We've been using the ASV on our Torah tablets, which now, just this week, we published Leviticus. So you can get Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Numbers will be in a few weeks, and these have the text of the Pentateuch in the ASV, but it also has all of the Torah portions, the annual cycle, the triennial cycle. It has the white spaces, the breaks in the text according to the oldest book that we have, the oldest Bible, the Leningrad Codex, and the oldest complete, I should say. So anyway, Leviticus just came out. So forgive the fact that this document for today's class is not in the ASV, but you'll be able to follow along. Okay, now the first thing that we want to do on page 1 of the chart, we're going to go through a lot, but we're going to try to do it fairly quickly. I want you to notice that we're dealing with Exodus 24, verse 12 through 18, and Deuteronomy 9, verses 8 and 9. So these two texts, side by side, give you the same narrative story, but with differences, with variations between the sources, and we're going to see. Sometimes they match fairly closely. Okay. Now, the first thing I'll point out on page 1 of the document is that in Deuteronomy 9, verse 8, it says, "Even at Horeb, you provoked the Lord to wrath, and the Lord was so angry with you that he was ready to destroy you." Now, this is not said in these exact words at this point in Exodus, but I did want to point out that Deuteronomy is inclined to use, the writer of Deuteronomy is more likely to use Horeb, whereas the priestly writer in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers will almost always use Sinai. So some of you may be more familiar with Sinai, but you've noticed that sometimes the Bible refers to the sacred mount as Horeb. Horeb, Sinai, different sources, different writers. Will continually look at that as we work through. Now, the next thing I want to do is flow through these texts, Exodus 24:12 and Deuteronomy 9:8. So just make sure that you're following along with me. Look at the center column. The Lord said to Moses, by the way, this is not recorded in Deuteronomy. And why is that? Because Deuteronomy is presented as a first-person narrative. It's Moses himself. So Exodus is a third-person account. The Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, that I may give you the tablets of stone and the law and the commandments which I have written for their instruction. So Moses rose with his assistant Joshua. Moses went up into the mountain of God. And he said to the elders, wait here for us until we return, and behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a dispute, let him go to them. Then Moses went up the mountain. I'm going to page 2, but we're still working through these texts. And the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And on the 7th day called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud. The appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the sight of the people of Israel. Moses entered the cloud and went up on the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Now, the comparative source in Deuteronomy 9 is much briefer, and it's written in the first person. So what I just read in Exodus is someone, a writer, a scribe, telling the story of Moses going up to the mountain. It goes from the call of Moses, come up to me on the mountain. See, the Lord said to Moses. Now watch Deuteronomy. Listen to this. When I went up the mountain, notice to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Lord made with you, when I went up the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Lord made with you, I remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. First person. Now the difference is, aside from first and third person, and the Deuteronomy accounts being much more concise, is that there's no match in Deuteronomy for all of this material and information about Joshua going with him and Moses talking to the elders. None of that. Moses is just telling the story. He goes up the mountain, he's alone, and he remains there 40 days and 40 nights. Another significant difference that's on page 2 of the document, you'll see it very clearly, is that Exodus 24 gets into this idea of the glory of the Lord. The glory of the Lord appears in Exodus, in Leviticus, and in Numbers many times. Those references are on the sheet, but guess what? The glory of the Lord is a priestly piece that never appears in Deuteronomy. Now, other people have different reasons for that, but the most obvious reason is that it's a different source. Okay. Now, what we've got next on this second page, we're on the second page, we'll get to in just a moment, but I wanted to bring out that according to Deuteronomy, what we just read in Deuteronomy 9, it says that when he went up there, he says he neither ate bread nor drank water. Exodus also mentions a fast, but on my chart on page 2, you'll notice that it's gray for Exodus 34:28. That means I pulled it up to show you how it aligns with the fast or the 40 days and 40 nights of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, the writer, first person, presented as written by Moses, as opposed to what we see in Exodus in the third person. Deuteronomy says it happened right then, so I brought it up to align it with that first-person account. Now, Moses is going to report in Deuteronomy 9, 10, and 11 that he receives the 10 words. And what I want to do is I want to bring in three passages that tell what was written and how it was written on the stone tablets. Look at Deuteronomy 9, 10, and 11, Exodus 31, 18, and Exodus 32, 5. I'm going to read Deuteronomy first because this flows naturally. In Deuteronomy 9, it says he goes up there, he remains 40 days and 40 nights. He didn't eat bread or water. And verse 10, the Lord gave me the 2 tablets of stone written with the finger of God, and on them were all the words that the Lord had spoken with you on the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, on the day of the assembly. And at the end of 40 days and 40 nights, the Lord gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. Again, another point that we see in Deuteronomy versus Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, indicating different writers. Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, the priestly material always refers to the Decalogue, the 2 stone tablets, as the tablets of the testimony. The testimony, over and over, the edut. Deuteronomy, first person, presented as Moses speaking, never refers to these as the tablets of the testimony, the edut. Never, not once. What it says is it presents them as the tablets of the covenant. So let's look at these other 2 passages, Exodus chapter 31, verse 18, and just to get an idea of what it says about the 10 words. When God finished speaking with Moses on Mount Sinai, notice Mount Sinai, not Mount Horeb, he gave him the 2 tablets of the covenant, tablets of stone written with the finger of God. And by the way, this is the NRSV. I happen to have it within reach. And notice it calls it the tablets of the covenant. That's not what the Hebrew says in Exodus 31. It's the edut, the testimony. Now, chapter 32, verse 15 and 16, it says, Moses turned and went down from the mountain carrying the 2 tablets of the testimony or covenant, as your translation might have it, in his hands, tablets that were written on both sides, written on the front and on the back. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved upon the tablets. So we get this idea in both sources, in Exodus and in Deuteronomy, that the tablets are made of stone, that there are 2 of them, and that God somehow wrote with his finger on the stones. I've often talked about, we tend to think in terms of ancient stones and rocks, but I write on my tablet with my finger as well. So who knows? I mean, this is presented as God giving to Moses the tablets of the testimony. I don't know, maybe it was something fancy like this. Should have had a case on it, right? Now, the next thing I want to do is look at Exodus 32, verses 1 through 6. Exodus 32, this is on page 3, and what we're dealing with here is an introduction to something which is not mentioned in Deuteronomy, because it happens down there while Moses is up at the top of the mountain. And what it says, it presents the view from the down below. It says the people, when they realized that Moses was delayed in his coming, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron. Up, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him. So Aaron said to them, take off your earrings, boys and girls, wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me. So all the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. He received the gold from their hand, fashioned it with a graving tool, made a golden calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." They rose up early the next day, offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Now, this account is only known according to Exodus chapter 32. By the way, we're going to see something today. I'm going to mention it. I'm going to give my reasons I think it happened, and then we're going to talk about it in the discussion afterwards. But let me tell you this. Aaron is all in the priestly material. You'll find Aaron in Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, but in Deuteronomy, Aaron is only mentioned twice, 2 times. And I think those are significant, and I think I know why. So we're going to see that by the end of the class. But again, Deuteronomy doesn't know anything about this anxiety that's forming down below among the people because Moses is delayed in his coming back. Now, if you'll look at page 4, what happens now is that the story, the narrative comes back together. If you look at chapter 32 of Exodus, verses 7 through 10, and compare that with Deuteronomy 9, 12 through 14, you'll see this on page 4. Notice what we have here. Very similarly, we look at chapter 32, verse 7, middle of the page. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go down." Now look at Deuteronomy 9. The Lord said to me, "Arise, go down quickly from here." And then they're almost identical. "For your people, whom you have brought up out of the land of Egypt, have either acted corruptly or have corrupted themselves." That's close enough. "They've turned aside quickly out of the way that I commanded them. They have made for themselves," Exodus says, "a golden calf." Deuteronomy says a metal image in the English on the sheet. Now, again, the interesting thing to me is that, again, we have Deuteronomy, first-person narration, Exodus, third-person narration, very, very clearly different sources here. But in the note, you'll see in my note column, I'll say, in both accounts, a molten image is made. Mem, Samech, Kaf, Hey. Here at this point, Exodus tells us the image is of a calf. But Deuteronomy 9:16, where it agrees with Exodus here, nowhere in the text does the Hebrew say that they made a golden calf. The closest association is Exodus 32:31. We'll get to that. Okay, and then it picks back up, same flowing text here. We're still in Exodus 32. "They've worshiped it," continues God, according to the priestly writer, "and sacrificed to it, and said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt.'" And then look at the difference between verses 9 in Exodus 32 and verses 13 in Deuteronomy 9. Deuteronomy says, "Furthermore, the Lord said to me," first person, "I've seen this people. Behold, it's a stubborn people." The Lord, verse 9 of Exodus 32, the Lord said to Moses, third person, "I've seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people." Now, behind stubborn and stiff-necked, this is why we need more literal translations. Typically, the ASV gets this right. Where it doesn't, in any publication I'll put out, I'll footnote it. But stubborn people, stiff-necked people is the same in the Hebrew. It's people, people of a hard neck, like you just will not bend. And so then we get into this idea in both, as both of these wrap up in Exodus 37, verses 7 through 10, and Deuteronomy 9, verses 12 through 14. God says, I want to blot them out and I'm going to make a great nation. He's going to start over with Moses. And then, if you look, we're on page 5 of the document, and the text we're looking at here is Exodus 32, verses 11 through 14. We have, according to the narration in Exodus, an intercession that we don't see, that doesn't line up with Deuteronomy's narrative. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to see intercession in Deuteronomy. We're going to see that shortly. But what I want to look at are the details of the narration. So when you look at this, you're going to see that that Moses implores the Lord his God. 32:11. O Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt, and so forth? He goes on and he says, please forgive them. And, you can read this on your own. Verse 14, and the Lord relented from the disaster that he had spoken of bringing on his people. And then you'll notice that in 32, well, I'm going to pull these verses up. Let's look at where they come back together. So in Exodus 32:15 and Deuteronomy 9:15, this is where the story comes back together. Moses turned and went down from the mountain. Look at verse 15 in Deuteronomy 9. So I turned, first person, and came down from the mountain, and the mountain was burning with fire. And then both of these texts, I read this earlier from Exodus 32, verse 15 and 16. He says, and then Moses came down, he has the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand. Notice now we're on page 6. Page 6 says, the 2 tablets of the covenant were in my 2 hands. Okay? So now we get into another narrative difference between the two. Now, this is interesting, and I've got a note on this on page 6 of my document. Exodus has Moses carrying the 2 tablets in his hand, singular, while Deuteronomy has him carrying them in his 2 hands. So you have to picture this. If you're going to draw this, if you're going to make a painting of Moses coming down, do you draw both of the tablets in one hand, or do you have him carrying one in each hand, maybe under his arm? How big are they? See, we don't get the dimensions. We just have one text suggesting that he's got both in one hand, and one he's carrying a tablet in each hand. Notice in the note, the testimony, this is the difference in Exodus, 2 tablets of the testimony, Deuteronomy, 2 tablets of the covenant. I put in my note, the testimony means something specific. The 2 stone tablets, it's used in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, but never in Deuteronomy. There are 2 occurrences of the root word in Deuteronomy. Notice I put Deuteronomy 4:45 and Deuteronomy 6:20, but those refer to testimonies and not to the testimony, okay? It's worth a real dig. And the question is, why? Why would, let's assume that fundamentalism is correct and a singular author wrote all of this. Why is it that Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers that are associated more with priestly sources, why do those, without exception, refer to this as the edut, whereas in Deuteronomy, it never refers to the stone tablets as the edut, the testimony. It's always the covenant. Did the writer just decide, hey, I'm going to change the name of this, or is it a different source? And the answer is yes, it's a different source. Now, we're still on page 6, but if we look at Exodus chapter 32, verse 17 to 19, and compare that, as I do on the chart with Deuteronomy 9, verse 16 and 17, you'll see that Exodus has an account of Joshua hearing the noise of the people. And he says to Moses, there's a noise of war in the camp. He said, it's not the sound of shouting for victory or the sound of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing that I hear. And as soon as they came near the camp, by the way, Deuteronomy doesn't have any of this. The first person in Deuteronomy just says, he's coming down, he's got the 2 tablets in his hand, and he says, I looked, verse 16, and behold, you had sinned against the Lord your God. You had made yourself a golden calf. You had turned aside quickly from the way that the Lord had commanded you. So I took hold of the 2 tablets and threw them out of my 2 hands, notice, and broke them. The Hebrew for hands is in the dual. Like he says, I threw them from my hands, both of my hands, and broke them before your eyes. Now, Exodus chapter 32 says, Joshua told Moses, say, I hear this sound. And as they came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, Moses' anger burned hot, and he threw the tablets out of his hand and broke them. Now, people can debate why these are different. Let's assume that the first person is the voice of Moses coming through. The fundamentalist view in Exodus is that Moses also wrote it, even though it's in the third person and it reads totally different than this. So we have to keep comparing, but Exodus reports here that Moses is so angry, it reports his anger, whereas Deuteronomy just says that he threw it down and broke it. I looked, behold, you had sinned against the Lord your God, and he throws them down. Okay, now, here we get to a text which is only reported in Deuteronomy, but not in Exodus. And that's in Deuteronomy 9, verses 18 through 20. Here, Deuteronomy reports an intercession of Moses on behalf of or for the people. Remember, back in Exodus 32, 11 through 14, there was an intercession of Moses reported in the third person account. But in Deuteronomy, the intercession comes in here. He throws down the tablets and shatters them and then intercedes for the people. It says that I neither ate bread nor drank water because of all the sin you had committed in doing what was evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. Now, if you look at my note, I put in the note that this is also an apparent second fasting of 40 days and 40 nights in Deuteronomy. Compare Deuteronomy 9:9. So if you look at Deuteronomy 9:9 and Deuteronomy 9:18, we get the idea that Moses fasted at the giving of both the first and second sets. We'll talk more about that probably in the after class discussion. Okay. Now, I want to look at verse 19. We're still rolling through this. In verse 19, for I was afraid of the anger and hot displeasure that the Lord bore against you, so that he was ready to destroy you, but the Lord listened to me that time also. In other words, his intercession worked. Now, here's something that's strange, and we're going to touch on this. Verse 20, and the Lord was angry with Aaron, so angry with Aaron that he was ready to destroy him, and I prayed for Aaron at that time also. Okay? Now, I want to do a little exercise real quickly. I want to skip this. In fact, let me go ahead and bring the next verses up, and then I'll go through this exercise. Exodus 32:20 and Deuteronomy 9:21 is where we come back together in the narrative. But I want to read something. For I was afraid. I'm reading from Deuteronomy 9:19. I'm going to build up to where we're at now. I was afraid of the anger and hot displeasure that the Lord bore against you, so that he was ready to destroy you. But the Lord listened to me at that time also. Then I took the sinful thing, the calf that you had made, and burned it with fire, crushed it, grinding it very small until it was fine as dust. And I threw the dust of it into the brook that ran down the mountain. Now, what I did there, there's a reason for. Deuteronomy 9, verse 20 is one of two references to Aaron. I just read that passage and I removed Aaron from that passage. Reference to Aaron, because I'm going to show, especially in our after-class discussion, that that's an interpolation. Aaron was not part of that text. Proof number one. On the page in front of you, Exodus 32 doesn't mention this point about Aaron. This is, again, Deuteronomy 9:20 is one of two mentions of Aaron, and this one reads perfectly without the reference to Aaron, and the other one, you're going to see shortly, also reads perfectly without Aaron. Clearly, a later interpolation. The question you might be asking is why, and that's more than we're going to get into today. But here's what I want to bring out. In both Exodus and Deuteronomy, Moses takes this sinful thing, the calf, and he breaks it, and he burns it with fire, and he grinds it with powder, and he throws it in the water. Now, Exodus brings in something that Deuteronomy doesn't have. And it says, after it says he scattered it on the water, he made the people of Israel to drink it. He makes the people of Israel to drink it. Now, if you're familiar with the Pentateuch and the priestly legislation, you should be reminded of the case of the unfaithful wife, where a man who suspects his wife has committed adultery would bring her to the priest, to the tabernacle. They would take some dirt off the floor of the tabernacle, mix it with living water, mayim chaim, and have the woman drink this substance. And if she's committed adultery, various translations read differently, but basically her innards, to use some old English, will explode. It's a really, really bad deal. As I've often said, not nearly as bad as the ride home with said wife if that doesn't happen, that you didn't trust her and so forth. You get the picture. Okay, so, but it's the priestly writings, Numbers chapter 5, verse 16 through 31, and the rabbinic legislation in Tractate Sotah. It's talking about the unfaithful wife. But Deuteronomy doesn't mention any of that. It's only in Exodus. Now we get to another section that's only in Exodus, that's not in Deuteronomy, and that's Exodus 32, verses 21 through 28. I'm on page 8. Okay, now again, Moses, the thing about Aaron, if we read Exodus's account, the priestly writer of Exodus has Aaron all in the middle of this. It's Aaron they go to. It's Aaron that makes the calf out of their earrings. It's Aaron that throws it in. He tells Moses here, you're not going to believe this, because Moses asked him, what'd you do? How'd this happen? Look at this, verse 22. Aaron said, let not the anger of my Lord burn hot. You know the people, they're set on evil. They said to me, make us gods who shall go before us. And as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him. And I said to them, let any man who have gold take it off. And they gave it to me. I threw it in the fire, and out came this calf. And when Moses saw that the people had broken loose, parenthetical statement follows, ladies and gentlemen, for Aaron had let them break loose to the derision of their enemies. What I'm getting at is, what's the story about Aaron? we know that some of this is not true. The question is, was it written at that time or later? So, for instance, you say, what is not true? Well, we know that Aaron didn't just throw gold in and a cow popped out. So that part is obviously a falsification. It sounds like something someone who is against Aaron would write, but we'll entertain more of why that is later. But Deuteronomy knows nothing of this story. And they're down. See, they're having this conversation. According to Exodus, in the third person, Moses says to Aaron, what did this people do to you that you brought such a great sin on them? Deuteronomy is totally silent about all of this. Interesting. And then, according to Exodus 32, Moses divides the camp. And he says, everybody who is on the Lord's side, come over here and get your swords. And the rest of y'all take the sword. What happens next in Exodus 32, going down to verse 28, is that the sons of Levi gathered around Moses, and then they hear this, thus says the Lord God, put your sword on your side, each of you, go to and fro from gate to gate throughout the camp, and each of you kill his brother and his companion and his neighbor. And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and that day about 3,000 men of the people fell. 3,000 slaughtered by the sword. Now, then it goes on, and this is the important part. We're going to look at two differences here, two different stories about how Levi came to be chosen for their special role. One is they were obedient to this task to kill all the bad guys that we just read, but there's a whole nother story. Deuteronomy doesn't know anything about that. Exodus knows that story. Deuteronomy has a totally different reason for the Levitical selection. Look at Exodus 32, verse 29, and Deuteronomy 10, verses 8 and 9. Exodus 32, verse 29, and Moses said, today you've been ordained for the service of the Lord, each one at the cost of his son and his brother, so that he might bestow a blessing on you as this day. So in other words, according to Exodus 32, verse 29, because they killed the bad actors, 3,000 in number, they are ordained for the service of the Lord. Deuteronomy has a different story altogether. It doesn't mention anything about killing anybody, especially not people of Israel. But listen to verse 8 of chapter 10 in Deuteronomy. At that time, the Lord set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the covenant of the Lord, to stand before the Lord, to minister to him, and to bless in his name to this day. Therefore, Levi has no portion or inheritance with his brothers. The Lord is his inheritance, as the Lord your God said to him. Okay? Now, I know there are questions about some of this, and that's why we have an after-class discussion. I encourage those to take place at that time. But let's go through the last little bit of this. It's very important to look at these side by side, or you'll never see differences. Again, it's going to be half a year before somebody reads Deuteronomy 9 and 10 if they're working on Exodus 32. So in this text, let's look at Exodus 32, verses 30 through 35. All right, it says, the next day, Moses said to the people, you've sinned a great sin, and now I'll go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. Moses returned to the Lord. Alas, the people have sinned a great sin. They've made for themselves Elohei Zahav, gods of gold. But now, if you'll forgive their sin, But if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written. But the Lord said to Moses, third person, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. But now go, lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them. Then the Lord sent a plague on the people because they made the calf, the one that Aaron made. Couple of differences. Number one, Deuteronomy has nothing about this, none of this. And you can come up with another reason as to why. But the bottom line is that Moses, during his intercession, offers to be blotted out of the book, and he's reminded by God, again, all this is third person, this idea that the person that sins against me, I'm going to blot him out, but you can't, there's no substitutionary punishment. Like you can't be blotted out because somebody else did something bad. That's echoed in Deuteronomy 24, verse 16. Sins can't pass on from the father to the son and so forth. That's also in Jeremiah. It's also in Ezekiel. It's also in several passages. So transgenerational curses, if people have tried to take your money to break those bonds, don't worry about it. Don't spend your money. Don't waste your money. The person that sins will die. Now, again, we now have a plague that is sent on the people, another plague, but we don't know. Deuteronomy has nothing about that. Okay, now we're going to look at Exodus. Now, I'm on page 10, Exodus 34:1 through the first part of 2, and Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. Let's look at these together. There's verse 1 of 34. The Lord said to Moses, cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. And be ready and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai. Okay, so that's Exodus. Deuteronomy 10, and at that time the Lord said to me, first person, cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets that you broke, and come up to me on the mountain. Now, the interesting thing about this, when I look at this side by side, is that there are similarities. Both of these, the Lord says to Moses that Moses is to cut the tablets. Now, we don't know if Moses made the first 2 tablets or if when he receives them from God, they're ready-made. God cut them, God engraved them, God gave them to him. We don't know. What we do know is that the second set, Moses is told to cut out of the rock, bring him these stones, and God's going to engrave them. In other words, God says, I'm going to write on the second set of tablets what was on the first set of tablets, right? Now, what I think is interesting is that seems fairly consistent. Now, what is different is, as we get into, we look a little bit at, let me see one thing. Okay, yep. We look at the next passage as we continue in Exodus. After he tells him to come up to the mount, present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. No one shall come up with you. Let no one be seen throughout all the mountain. Let no flocks or herds graze opposite the mountain. Deuteronomy doesn't have any of that. But then in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 2, God tells Moses, and make an ark of wood. Now, I've taught this for years. I first heard it from James Tabor. I'll put a link to his article that he published years ago. Deuteronomy, it's something about the other Ark of the Covenant. In fact, some of you might post that link in the chat. I'll post it in the description later. But this is big. So now let's look at, let me finish this part. I will write, Exodus 34, on the tablets, the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. Deuteronomy 10:2, again, I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets that you broke, and you shall put them in the ark. And then it says, So I made an ark of acacia wood. Moses says he's told, according to Deuteronomy 10, to make an ark. And here it says he made an ark. Now, if you read Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, they don't know about this. The ark of the priestly literature, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, that's not made by Moses. That's made by Bezalel and Aholiab. It's very clear. Now, some might seek to bring a little bit of peace to this part and say, well, maybe the ark that Moses made might have been put in the, maybe there was a box within a box. But we've got two texts that said the only thing that was in the ark, whatever the ark was, were the two stone tablets that Moses put in there, right, at Horeb. Now let's keep rolling through this. Look at Exodus chapter 34, verse 4. So Moses cut two tablets of stone like the first. He rose early in the morning, went up on Mount Sinai as the Lord had commanded him, and took in his hand two tablets of stone. Now, for the first time, Deuteronomy 10, which says, and I cut two tablets of stone like the first and went up the mountain with the two tablets in my hand. For the first time, Deuteronomy has singular hand in agreement with Exodus. Before that, Deuteronomy always had in my two hands. So that's interesting. Okay, now we're rolling through this. Look at Exodus 34, verses 5 through 27. In Exodus 34, 5 through 27, we're on page 11, we get a text which has no comparable reading in Deuteronomy. It's a report in the priestly account. The Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed before him, all third person, and proclaimed, the Lord God, merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children's children to the third and the fourth. By the way, this self-description of God, this self-description is frequently mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. You'll see in my notes section that I have several. In fact, this is one of the most oft repeated phrases in the Hebrew Bible. Deuteronomy has no match. And then, like for instance, in Exodus 34, verses 8 through 9, Moses quickly bows his head, and it says that, if I have found favor, verse 9, in your sight, O Lord, please let the Lord go in the midst of us, for it's stiff-necked people. Pardon our iniquity, our sin, take us for your inheritance. None of this is in Deuteronomy. And as you work through, now something striking takes place in the text I want to look at. In Exodus 34:10, behold, I am making a covenant. Now remember, the whole point of Exodus 34 and Deuteronomy 10 is to receive the second set of tablets. Now, initially, we read that they were the same words, that God is going to write on the second set of tablets the same words that were written on the first set of tablets that were broken. So we have to ask ourselves, now we're in the story according to Exodus, the priestly writer, and we have to see, is that what is conveyed in this text? Stay with me. 34:10, behold, I'm making a covenant. And then look at verse 11. Observe what I command you this day. Behold, I'll drive out before you the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. Take care lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land to which you go, lest it become a snare in your midst. You shall tear down their altars, break their pillars, cut down their asherim. For you shall worship no other God for the Lord. whose name is jealous, is a jealous God, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. And when you whore after their gods and sacrifice to their gods, and you're invited, you eat of his sacrifice, and you take their daughters for your sons, and your daughters whore after their gods, and make your sons whore after their gods. Verse 7, you shall not make for yourself any gods of cast metal. Interesting that that would appear after they made gods of cast metal. Verse 18, keep the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you keep the unleavened bread as I commanded you at the time appointed, the month of Aviv. For in the month of Aviv you came out from Egypt, and all that opened the womb are mine. All your male livestock, the firstborn of cow and sheep, firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, or if you will not redeem it, you shall break its neck. All the firstborn of your sons you shall redeem, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. Verse 21, 6 days shall you work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. In plowing time and harvest you shall rest. You shall observe the feast of weeks, first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. 3 times in the year shall all your males appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. I will cast out nations before you and enlarge your borders. No one shall covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times in the year. Verse 25, rolling to the bottom here. We're on page 14. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, or let the sacrifice of the feast of Passover remain until morning. Best of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. House of the Lord your God. They don't have a house of the Lord your God yet. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Verse 27, and the Lord said to Moses, write these words, for in accordance with these words have I made a covenant with you and with Israel. That is strange, because chapter 34 is supposed to describe God writing the same 10 words that were on the first set of tablets, and it even begins, I'm making a covenant with you. Tear down, and these are the statutes that are listed, the commands listed. No covenants with natives. You got to tear down the altars, eliminate idols, not have other gods. You're not supposed to eat their sacrifices, not supposed to join with and intermarry with, not supposed to make idols, keep unleavened bread. It gives a little bit about sacrifice and Sabbath and Shavuot, the pilgrim festivals. No blood with leaven, the Passover rule, meat and dairy. With these words, is he making a covenant? It's presented as if this is another version of the 10 words of the covenant. In fact, most scholars who read this call this the ritual 10. It's another set of commandments or words which are presented. It's as if the priestly writer is coming up with a different list. And we're going to, again, talk more about this as we need in the after class. Now, I want you to look with me. We're going to compare Exodus 34, 28 and 29a with Deuteronomy 10, 4 and 5. So he, third person, Moses, was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He ate neither bread nor drank water. And he wrote on the tablets. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. Now that follows everything that I read in Exodus 34, all of those different commandments. Interesting. You see, because the writer of Exodus 34 is presenting the words that I read, the priestly ritualistic words, as if they are the 10 commandments. It says very clearly, he wrote, next verse, the next verse, he was there, talking about Moses, was there with the Lord 40 days. He ate neither bread nor drank water, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant. Now, if you say, well, the he there is God, as we would expect, well, then who is the he that fasted for 40 days and 40 nights? You see, It clearly in context is Moses. Moses didn't eat bread, he drank no water, and Moses wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. Now, 29a of 34 says, and when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, as he came down from the mountain, we'll get into the next part in a moment. Deuteronomy 10, verses 4 and 5, it doesn't say Moses wrote on the 2 stone tablets. In fact, according to Deuteronomy, all Deuteronomy knows, first person, Moses says, and he, talking about God, wrote on the tablets in the same writing as before the 10 Commandments. Now I'm using the English 10 Commandments. In Hebrew, it's Aseret HaDevarim, the 10 words. Notice the next verse, so you don't get confused. Deuteronomy has this, Exodus doesn't. In the same writing as before, the 10 Commandments that the Lord had spoken to you on the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, on the day of assembly, and the Lord gave them to me. Verse 5, and I turned and came down from the mountain, and I put the tablets in the ark that I had made, and there they are, as the Lord commanded me. So what we have Moses says, I went back up there. I brought the stone tablets. God told Moses to make stone tablets. Deuteronomy says Moses made them. Moses is also told in Deuteronomy, make an ark to put them in. And so he brings up the tablets, and God writes the same words that were spoken out of the midst of the fire on the day of assembly on that second set of tablets. He comes down with the second set of tablets, and he puts them in the ark that he made. Exodus 34 doesn't know about a box that Moses made. In Exodus 34, it's a whole different list of words. And according to Exodus 34, Moses wrote those words. Interesting. What do we do with all this? Now, if we look at, let me see, Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 6 through 9. I want to read something to you. I mentioned Aaron earlier. Now, again, this is the NRSV. I'm going to just read Deuteronomy 10, verses 6 through 9. Let me read verse 5 first. So I turned and came down from the mountain and put the tablets in the ark that I had made, and there they are, as the Lord commanded me. The Israelites journeyed from Beerot Bnei Yakin to Moserah. There Aaron died, and there he was buried. His son Eleazar succeeded him as priest. From there they journeyed to Gudgodah, from Gudgodah to Jotbatah, a land flowing with streams. You'll see why I'm doing a different voice. At that time, the Lord set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the covenant of the Lord, to stand before the Lord, to minister to him, and to bless in his name to this day. Therefore, Levi has no allotment or inheritance with his kindred. The Lord is his inheritance, as the Lord your God promised him. I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, as I'd done the first time. Bear with me. Now I'm going to leave out verses 6 through 9. I'm going to read verse 5, and I'm going to skip down to verse 10. And you're going to see the interpolation here. So I turned and came down from the mountain and put the tablets in the ark that I had made, and there they are, as the Lord commanded me. I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, as I had done the first time, and once again the Lord listened to me. The Lord was unwilling to destroy you. You see that? Now, what does that mean? Verse 6 through 8, or verse 9, first of all, it gives a part of a journey. It gives a part of the journey of the children of Israel. But get this, no other list of journeying points lines up with this. For instance, it mentions Aaron. This is the second of 2 references to Aaron in Deuteronomy, and neither of them fit. Why do I say that? According to everything else we read, Aaron doesn't die at Moserah. He dies on Mount Hor. Now, an apologist will say, yeah, they also called it Mosera. No, they didn't. No, these are different places. In fact, when you look at the list from Be'erot, Bene-Yakin to Mosera, and you see Gud Godah and Gud Godah to Jotbatah and land and so forth, compare that with other journey list, for instance, Numbers chapter 33, they don't align. Verses 6 through 9 are a later interpolation. It's putting Aaron in the story just like Deuteronomy 9:20, because it's aligning it with priestly text in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. Now, Exodus chapter 34 is our last set of text in our comparison here. This begins on page 15, Exodus 34, verse 29b through 35. According to Exodus, Moses doesn't know this, but his face shines. In fact, this is where we get the idea that Moses had horns, because this is translated or mistranslated in some of the translations in the past, and it just kind of, the medieval artist drew Moses with horns because it's trying to depict that he had these horns of light. So it says he didn't know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. Then it says, Aaron and all the people of Israel saw Moses, and behold, the skin of his face shone. They were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the leaders of the congregation returned to him, and Moses talked with them. Afterward, all the Israelites came near, and he commanded them all that the Lord had spoken with him in Mount Sinai. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. And whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he'd remove the veil until he came out. And when he came out and told all the people of Israel what he was commanded, the people of Israel would see the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face was shining, and Moses would put the veil over his face again until he went in to speak with him. Deuteronomy doesn't have this. And the interesting thing about it is we never read about it again. It's just in this strange Exodus 34. So we have two different stories here. We have the story from Exodus, primarily chapter 24, 32, and 34, which describe the narratives behind which we have 2 tablets given, sin of the calf, the worshiping of the idol, 2 more tablets made. Both Exodus 24, 32, 34, and Deuteronomy 9 and 10 have these stories, but they're different. They're vastly different. The words on the stones are different. The maker of the ark is different. The speaker of the text is different. And the only way we see these differences, first of all, you have to be willing to see the differences. Some people aren't. But in order to see the differences, we have to put them side by side, and most people aren't willing to do that or find no need to do that because they've never even heard of this method. We're going to meet now in an after-class discussion. If you are part of our support team through the Yakad, whether that's YouTube or Discord or Patreon, or you donate in any way to Horeb, we really appreciate that. You make it possible for us to do everything we do, and so that we don't have to charge for anything. You're invited to the Zoom call. All the rest of you, we don't want to leave you out. We want you to participate as well. So you get to join on YouTube. You'll be automatically redirected. If you're not, the link to the after-class discussion YouTube is in the description. Meet us there. Until next time, Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov.